get your mind.
Yeah. Was there ever a thought of maybe including a companion at the time?
Well, that rather large person that looks like Ollie Hardy is the companion, really. Trying not to be the companion.
He's trying not to be the companion. He's always actually trying to sell Sylvester a companion. And we thought it would be nice to play on all of the stereotypes that when you think of a Doctor Who companion, he goes through what he's got. He's got an ankle twister. He's got an I don't understand. He's got a, what's the other one he's got? I don't understand, an ankle twister.
He never had a screamer.
No, we took a screamer out. So we wanted to make a joke about that, and through all of it, he's trying not to be the companion. And when you see the very, very last scene, I won't give it away, but he's basically become the companion. But it's in an affectionate way, and I hope it's quite funny. But we just wanted to play on those stereotypes.
That actually started off on that bc9 because I remember Steve, this is when we were just throwing ideas around, and Steve had said, oh, right at the end, this
I really did like that a lot and thought, how it developed into this dark nightmare, really, from rather silly, not silly, but a story of a suburban comedy every week, and then suddenly it becomes rather dark and a bit sad, really, isn't it? Yeah, that's good. Good to do. Yeah.
It's been very popular with the fans.
Is that this? Sorry.
Steve Campbell, Nicholas Courtney, Gary Downey, Fraser Hines, Caroline John, John Neeson, Monica Turner, Monica Wills, Paul Laker, and Sylvester McCoy. Without whose hard work, none of it would have happened. The one who's coordinated all of us, Mr. Mark O'Grady, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Well, I've certainly enjoyed this weekend. Have you? Yes! Well, that's good. Again, I'd like to reiterate what Paul said. Thank you to our guests, our celebrities who've been entertaining you the whole weekend. Thank you to the team who put the show on. And thank you especially for coming. And we'll let you know when the next event is. And hopefully see you all there. Thank you.
I can see that there are more of you up there. Ladies and gentlemen, it's terribly exciting to be in here, because outside of work, excuse me, I'll just put this vodka down. Outside of work, actors often feel very much as if they're approaching death because they're out of work. And old actors who are approaching death feel this kind of pain doubly. So, because I've finished most of the things I've been involved in the last few months and don't expect to start again too soon, I was very excited to be asked to come here because, in a sense, all the years that I've been coming to these dues, I realized that I've been actually feasting and nourishing myself from the fans. Somebody said to me the other day, if the BBC brought back Doctor Who, would you play it again, they said. And I had to say, but I've never stopped playing it. I never went away. I never went away because the kind, good, creative, imaginative fans, loyal fans, actually kept me at it. So I never did go away, you see, because fan love is quite different from ordinary love. It's really... It is. It's quite superior. And it's superior because, unlike ordinary love, fan love actually lasts. And that's it. You see, so it lasts under steak and sodium. And the thing is about this fandom, it's a two-way thing where you sustain. That's what I mean when I say I've never been away with Doctor Who. Something that enters the popular imagination never does go away, because television, film, of course, moving films, but the great television programs confer a kind of immortality. It's an amazing thing, that, because it's as if, for example, if you don't know an actor, you can look back and see the corpus of the work, and in that sense the actor is still alive, even though, of course, he may be old and grey, and not very agile anymore. The other day I saw myself in an old film running upstairs and I nearly fainted. It was excitement. I called my wife and she shook her head and it was incredible to see myself just running upstairs, I thought. And all those years ago I used to take it for granted, And now, I approach it more carefully. I go upstairs very carefully. I can't run upstairs anymore. But I try to savor it because there may come a time when I'll never be able to go upstairs. In which case I'll have to live in a bungalow. But the sadness of in-between work is that it's as if, because we can't live without drama, no one can live without drama, but because lots of actors are head cases, they need the drama. And I think to myself, after Randall and Hopkirk and after a few other things, I was in France last week on a little job at the BBC. But in between time, I found myself, I live in the country, I was so bored the other day with no drama in my life that I actually went to visit my own grave. I didn't actually put flowers on it because I'm not in that bad a state. But I stood there, because I had nothing else to do. And then because I live in Kent, where for some reason there seems to be an outbreak of flies this year, the only drama at all in my part of Kent is flies. Last year it was, no, it wasn't. Sorry, no, that was the year before. And so I found myself, the wife says, what are you going to do today? And I say, well, where's my fly swat? And she says, I think it's in the cupboard over there. So I get the fly swat out and chase the flies around a bit and swat a few of them. And that got rather boring as well, because, there's a funny thing about killing flies. It doesn't give you all that much satisfaction. But nobody at least criticizes you. I mean, unless, of course, there are Buddhists here. But they might not like it. Nudists are quite indifferent, whereas Buddhists actually do care a lot. So there is a difference. Of course, some people are seasonal. Some people are kind of nudists in the summer and Buddhists in the winter. But that doesn't matter anyway. So I find myself, killing flies, and it's given me no satisfaction at all. There's simply no drama in it at all. There's no sadistic satisfaction, which is disappointing if you're doing it all day. And I began to think to myself, I know. I went down to the hardware store, it's about 3 miles away, and that was exciting. And I got some of these sticky fly catchers. You probably don't have flies in Coventry. But anyway, these hideous things, things hang down, strips of stickiness like that, and the flies get caught on them. And so this improved the drama. On the second day, I put away my fly swatter, and I then began to actually ring up friends and say, "Psst, do you want to come round for a drink? I've got 2 blue bottles on the sticker." And 2 other old boys in the village came up, and they said, "We're coming up to Tom Baker's to watch the blue bottles actually dying. It's a terrible thing." This is, I'm confessing to you now, because in a little while I'll ask for absolution. I'm confessing that watching a blue bottle actually dying is interesting in my part of Kent. So you can imagine what it's like there. Because last year, I tell you the excitement last year, something that was flooding one year and flies this year, and last year it was dandruff in Maidstone. Don't go to Maidstone, whatever you do, don't go to Maidstone. Maidstone's incredibly boring. It is incredibly boring. And there was this outbreak of dandruff everywhere, and all sorts of strange men, mostly actors, I thought. There are kind of people. Have you seen them? Men walking around with those kind of orange marmalade-coloured wigs on. There may be 1 or 2 here. If there are, come up front and I'll introduce you. See what I mean? Those terrible, terrible hairpieces where you can see the grey coming underneath, and it's kind of bright marmalade, and you can recognise it 100 feet away. Easily, right across Oxford Street. Say that there's a man with a terrible wig on. And you're not allowed to actually tell people about this, are you? You can't say anything about their wigs. False teeth and wigs are kind of taboos. So, the extraordinary thing was, suddenly, when the word got out that there was dandruff everywhere in boring Maidstone, lots of men in blazers wearing those terrible wigs were there. Of course, the outbreak didn't last long. So by the time it got to them, and they got there, some of it had gone away. And the sad thing about these people, some of them are actors, not me, because this actually is real. It may not look real, I may not look real, but this is real. And these chaps are the sort of fellows who have these awful wigs on, and at parties, I've been there, they've all got a little lump on their hip. Do you know what that is? It's a salt cellar. And what they do is they keep going out and putting salt on their shoulders. And then they come back into the party with these terrible wigs on and salt on their shoulders. They're always going like that, saying, "There's bloody dandruff everywhere." And it's a kind of inadequacy that, you know, people feel that they've somehow got to reassure you that this isn't a wig. It's really rather like a man, isn't it? You know, when someone stabs his wooden leg, pretending he hasn't got a wooden leg. But to me, that's the way it is in where I live, in my part of Kent. Anyway, what has relieved me in the last few months is in Rambler and Hobcote principally, and also Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know if I haven't seen you since then. I did Dungeons and Dragons for a Canadian film, for, I don't know, some big American producers as well. And when I got the script, which was terrible, but they sent a first-class ticket, so I thought the script was okay. The first thing actors do is to read the ticket, you know. If it's a first-class ticket, you think, this is going to happen. But I don't, of course, read the whole of scripts, because that's absolutely pointless. So I just found my bits and read them. And because it was a Canadian film, I thought I was playing an elk. You know, big enough to play an elk. Big enough to play a big elk. And so, because it was Canadian, you know, I've been to Canada, and they have elks, and so when I got to Prague, which is quite interesting if you like being backstage in an opera, and so I was kept waiting for about 10 days there, in great luxury, and then I turned up, you know, to shoot these 2 or 3 scenes, and when I got there was this little man who said he was the director, and he was kind of disguised to look like, not very well, to look like Steven Spielberg. And he came up to me and he said in his pitiful voice, you must forgive my accent, I can't do this sort of thing, but I'll try because I'm shameless. He said, "Hi, I'm your director." I said, "What?" He said, "I'm your director." And he was surrounded by all the top brass, you know, the lighting cameraman, some of the producers. I said, "You can't be. You, a director? Oh, come on, he's putting me on, isn't he?" He said, "Look around." They all shook their heads. They all seemed terribly pleased behind his back that I was saying this. So I'll prolong the agony a bit. I said, "How long have you been a director then?" "Why," he said, "I've wanted to be a director all my life." I said, well, yeah, but when did you become a director? Well, he said, about 6 weeks ago. He said, there you are, you don't look like a director to me. Deliberately ignoring the fact that he looked very like Steven Spielberg, although some of it was not all that well made up. So, anyway, I said, look, before we go any further, I'd like to congratulate you on your courage. And because he was Canadian and a bit slow on the uptake, he said, how do you mean? I said, I'd like to congratulate you on your courage. I only like working for brave directors. And you are obviously brave. So he tried to stand up, and he said, how do you mean I'm brave? I said, listen, you may not know it, but I suspect that you do, because you're suddenly looking bright and interesting to me. Several directors I worked for in films have died soon after working with me. And some of them in dreadful agony of inexplicable, horrific illnesses. To this little fellow, his name was Corrie, I think. If he's here, he'll tell you the truth. He said, Jesus Christ. And so he ran away, and so then I went to makeup and got ready. And then when I got to the makeup and saw the makeup there, I said, what is this? And they said, well, here's your costume and your makeup. I said, this has got nothing to do with elk. And the girl said, what do you mean, elk? I said, I'm playing an elk. It says here, elk. She said, listen, oh Christ, she said, I'll tell you in that office. It was a misspelling, it was elf. So suddenly I thought, hello, these Canadians have got a sense of humour. So I went to find this little director, Corrie, who was just coming out of the lavatory. And I said, hey, am I playing an elf? And he said, yeah, that's right. Excuse me, and he rushed back into the lavatory. So I went outside, and he came out again. I said, an elf? Yeah. He said, yeah, an elf. I said, listen, I'm serious, I come from Liverpool. You may have heard of Liverpool. I said, and you know, we used to talk about elves and, you know, goblins and things like that. And I had a feeling, but I can't be sure of this. In fact, I can't be sure of anything, except that you're looking terrible. I thought that elves were little things. Ah, he said, no, not in Canada. No, not in Canada. He said, actually, he said, I didn't expect you to be quite so big. So this absolute oik hadn't actually checked, you know. Curious enough, as he was saying that, a man about 24 inches tall strolled through. And I said, is that the giant? He wasn't amused at all by this. He really wasn't amused at all. Anyway, somehow we got through 3 or 4 scenes over a couple of days, which were absolutely atrocious. It's amazing that this man had raised $30 million to do this computer game. So that was that taken out of the way. And finally I got home and I was very relieved and resolved not to go near any Canadian directors. I say that actually with a little bit of reserve because I get invited to Canada a lot, you know. Maybe not many people go to Canada willingly, but they ask me to go a lot to St. John's or Newfoundland. So they say, come and cheer us up. I get similar letters to that from Sweden as well. And now from Hungary, because they must be sending my stuff out to Hungary. And so that kind of kept me going, and I laughed about it and got home. And then, of course, I did Randall and Hobkirk. But Randall and Hobkirk, I didn't really meet anyone, because there was only me and Vic Reeves, who's called Jim Moore. There was only him and me, really, once with the girl, Amelia. And so that was got out of the way. And then, what else? Oh, yes, the other thing I must draw your attention to, because you're interested in these things, and if you're not, I'm going to tell you anyway, is that there's no doubt about it that sword and sorcery, which has never gone away, is actually very hot and in the air at the moment. I have 2 or 3 times in the last few months been interviewed on camera for Merlin. There's actually, I didn't get one of them, that's the one that's going in Czechoslovakia now, Arthur and the Round Table, done in a sort of traditional way. The second one is the BBC are doing a 10-part series of a modern Knights of the Round Table. And they thought that I'd be nice as Merlin, this kind of terrible dropout old man, who when the nation is under terrible stress, I have the power to reconstitute and recall, through DNA, I suppose, whatever that is, to recall these people. And it seems quite interesting. It really does seem quite interesting. And I'm on standby for that, so that might happen. But there's no doubt about it, it is actually everywhere now because of Dungeons and Dragons, these 2 Arthur films going, there's something else. And I keep being sent possible ones, which I never read, and just, I bin them, and then wait for a day, and then ring up the office and say, yes, I'd be delighted to do it, knowing perfectly well that it won't happen at all, really. The only thing that I have to look forward to, for certain, I mean, all things considered, is that they're going to make Rattle and Hopcake again. They're going to do 6 or 7 more. I don't know whether they're going to be written by Charlie Higson, but at least that's one thing to look forward to. And the other thing is, of course, I'm now, I've become sort of a writer. Do you like that phrase? And I've been having some letters about my children's novel, The Boy Who Kicked Pigs. The other day I received a letter from a child in Sidcup, I think. And her name is Molly Coxell, and she said, "Dear Tom Baker, I have read your book, and it is really quite disgusting. I felt sick, but I was never bored, and I did laugh a lot, especially when he got eaten by the rats." So I was terribly touched by this. She was obviously about 9 or 10, so I wrote back and said, "Dear Molly Coxell, thank you for your lovely letter. You really can write a good letter." And I sent her some pictures from my past, and some badges or something like that, and bunged it off with a very elaborately packed envelope. And 2 days later, I had about 12 letters, rather childish handwriting, from obviously Molly Cox's school friends, with the identical letter. They'd, written the same letter, and only one of them had sent it. So now I ignore it now, just keep saying, well, thanks very much for your letter. I'm glad you like The Boy Who Kicked Pigs. But it is interesting, isn't it, that my natural, some people think wonderful bad taste, is, has a kind of echo in children's minds, that they like to be disgusted. And so I'm now on with another disgusting novel called absolutely wonderful, and there are no flies, and lions lie down with lambs, and everyone's smiling, like that. Everyone's going like that all the time. And they're eating fruit, and no one gets the flu. In other words, no one dies. No one can commit adultery, or whatever it is, or commit anything. I mean, that strikes me as being hell. That actually strikes me as being hell, whereas, in some of the religious books I read, that strikes some people as being heaven. So I've got no views at all on the afterlife. I mean, I just hope it's a surprise. I mean, I really hope it's a surprise, and that the script writing is better than some of the stuff I get offered elsewhere. But the idea of serenading God, I mean, you must admit, in the Christian religion, why does God want to be serenaded all the time? And these people singing on these terrible programs on television, all out of tune, all singing these terrible old hymns, with too many words in the music. No, I think actually, if I was God, you see, I'm a bit suspicious of God because, well, having lived with him for a while, you get to know someone, don't you? Day and night. I used to get terribly nervous about that because the Roman Catholics are particularly, fragile in this way, because of course they believe not only in the omnipresence of God, but also that, so therefore God is absolutely everywhere watching you. That used to make me feel anxious as a child. Then also you had your guardian angel on your shoulder going everywhere with you, which, drove me crazy when I had to go to the lavatory, because I was a very highly strung boy. And you didn't want, in those days, we couldn't even use the words, but you were terribly frightened to rip off a tremendous Rabelaisian fart with an angel sitting on your shoulder. I mean, it just made you feel very self-conscious. That's why, when you meet very dedicated Roman Catholics, they walk in such a peculiar way. That's one of the reasons. And the other reason is there's something very dodgy about this, the ones who go to communion. I hope there are some Roman Catholics here, because I like to get at them a bit. Roman Catholics, actually, when they go to communion, not like the Anglicans, where you can believe anything there, but with the Roman Catholics, they actually, when they go to communion, listen to this, they eat, do you mind, the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus. And I said, when I was young, the first time I was struck across the side of the head by an adult. You know, when the priest said that, because he said, you know, you must love each other. And so we all said, oh yes, we must love each other. And then he said, you eat the body, blood, soul and divinity of our Lord Jesus Christ. And I put my hand up, yes, what is it, Baker? I said, doesn't that make us cannibals? And that's when the blow fell. It's funny, isn't it? Like when I recovered consciousness, I was on coma for about 2 weeks, it was Lent. When I recovered consciousness, funny, when I became, I said, my mother said, are you all right? I said, yes, I want to become an actor. It's funny, isn't it? So the first thing I said is I want to be rich. And after coming out of the coma, when I was struck by a priest who told us to love each other, was that I wanted to be an actor. It was extraordinary. I had to get out of it somewhere.
Lady?
Hi everybody, hope you're having a great time. And I'm really sorry that I can't be with you, but I'm involved in the new production. This is Adam. Say hello everybody. Hello. He hopes you're having a nice time as well, and we'll meet you soon.
I'll now do the ballet. I have actually done opera.
Really?
Yeah. I did opera. I was at the Welsh National Opera about 25 years ago playing Puck in A Midsummer Night's Dream by Benjamin Britten and William Shakespeare. One of your local lads. And I also just did it last year in France for the Opera de Rennes and in Germany. And I also did it at the Barbican Theatre. I was in an opera there.
So do you have to train to sing for that? I mean, opera's not something you can just belt out on the level of the bar, can you?
No, well, I didn't. Yes, I did. I did some training years ago when I did an operetta. I did The Pirates of Penzance, which was a revolutionary and wonderful production by an American producer. They brought it over to Britain. We did it at Drury Lane, and they brought over a singing teacher. She was quite a revolutionary singing teacher. She taught us all to sing, those that could, and discovered that I had a tenor voice. But I must confess that to play Puck in A Midsummer Night's Dream, you don't have to actually be a great singer. It's a speaking role. It's called Sprechgesang. You speak, sing. It's very complicated because you have to be absolutely precise to the music. And it's quite terrifying in many ways, dealing with it. I remember once doing it, I forgot a line, which is not unusual, but in an opera it was terrifying because I suddenly thought there was this huge orchestra and I'd forgotten a line and they were somewhere else. I was terrified, I nearly fainted. But the conductor made some funny signals which looked very rude to me, and I thought they were meant for me, but they were meant for the orchestra to jump a couple of bars. So it was all right. He explained to me afterwards that many times they get opera singers coming in from all over the world just to sing one role within the opera, and they've been singing it somewhere else, and they were singing a totally different production. So he said, most of the time it's just chaos. You know, you don't have to worry. We're so used to people just doing different lines, different.
One of the things I've always wondered that everyone thinks that an actor is just a craft. You learn the craft, and then bang, that's it, you're an actor. But there's really all kinds of different things that you have to learn how to do if you're going to